Good afternoon, everyone, or perhaps good evening. How are you all doing today? Carpo here. I decided I would make a video while I'm doing a project here. I'll start off with the sirens in the background. It's always a perfect background sound, especially with this video, which is basically about an emergency. And forgive me for not facing the camera here. I used to do a lot of videos like this for my other channel, my herb channel. And I would make videos where I would be trimming my cannabis plants, and I would sit there and talk to the camera while I was trimming. It's like work kind of helps you to focus. Anyhow, I've got these little pods, and a whole bunch of them have holes in them. So I'm getting the ones without holes in them so I can get the seeds. Because the ones with holes in them, well, the freaking budworms got in there and took over my seeds. So anyhow, this is about the economy, and I wanted to make it light. I don't want to make this overly complicated or doom and gloom. There's enough people already that do that out there. I wanted to ask a question. You know, how long do we really have until the whole economy falls apart in the United States? And what I mean by that is something that's so devastating that people are left basically holding the bag for years to come. If you're not aware of what happened back in the 30s, basically it became illegal to own gold for a period of time. The government forced all the Americans to turn in their gold under punishment of prison. And as soon as all the gold was confiscated, they raised the price of gold, thereby devaluing the dollar, and the United States made all the profit. Of course, in the name of security, national security, protecting the nation. And then in 2008, we had a housing crisis, a banking crisis rather, which all of us here know well about. And when you talk about a recession, it doesn't always affect everyone, you know, as hardly, but as brutally, I should say. So anyhow, what I wanted to talk about here was this idea of quantitative easing, which they did in 2008, which was the banks lending money to the, basically banks loan money to each other, okay, every day. Trillions of dollars every year go back and forth. And they call it, they might borrow a few $1 billion in order to have enough to cover deposits or withdrawals or loans or whatever it might be. And they call this actually repo. It's not the same as repossession, like a repo man. But so this money usually is taxed at about 2%. They'll charge each other about 2% interest. And lately, from what I understand, it's been around 5.5%. And the federal government, the Fed has, the Federal Reserve has been pumping money into the economy. Basically, let's just rephrase that. The Federal Reserve's been pumping money into the banks. And I'm just, I'm not an economics expert, but let me tell you, I've read a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. When I've read about half of it. It's like a 900-page book. And I also have one in there called Capital by Thomas Piketty. And these are both like well-known books on, the economy and how we got to where we are and the disparity of wealth. And so, no, I'm not an expert on all this stuff, but I'm just relaying what I've heard, that it's possible that we're heading for a major recession in the United States. Now let me just put it this way. If we are heading for a recession, nobody's going to tell you about it. The banks, the government, do not want panic. And that's the one thing that they always try to avoid is mass panic. And the best way to do that is just to ignore it. And I'll tell you what happened in 2008. They ignored it right up until it was too late. They did that on purpose, and they didn't let the public know what was going on. Apparently, the U.S. never, of course, came out of the 2008 recession. In fact, the U.S. has been kind of floating on this economy for for a very long time. And I don't really have the time, honestly, I do have the time, but you probably don't have the interest or patience or attention span to want to listen to the details about the Federal Reserve and how it was founded, the reason it was founded. And, years ago I would say abolish the Federal Reserve. And I don't believe that anymore because I understand better how it works and operates and why we created it in the first place. To basically keep the corrupt government from making and printing their own money for their own needs. However, it's not that it didn't solve the problems. It's always theory in practice, So in other words, these ideas were put forth in order to keep the money separate from the government, so we can keep the government honest. How well did that work, right? So, I kind of say let it burn. I have the let it burn attitude when it comes to the economy because, I don't really have anything wrapped up in it. It's just my normal life. Of course, I don't want to see everybody suffer, but I see it's a necessity that all this falls apart. We're living beyond our means in a lot of places. What we call progress is building too much crap too fast without thinking about where we're going. We're not living, and I'm not going on the hippie environmental rant here, but, what we're doing in the name of progress, damaging our environment means we're damaging ourselves. There's no difference. In the long run, everybody pays the price, and it's very frustrating to watch and sickening to watch. And so I'd almost rather see the economy just fall apart and hopefully slow down some of this progress so people can rethink where they're going and what they're doing and what their point is here. I don't have any answers. I only have ideas. That's all I can do is share my opinions and ideas. I even feel kind of stupid making a video about the economy. I probably won't even upload it, but then I think, well, maybe I should. If I were to give you one takeaway of this video and the reason why I'm making it, it's really simple. If you have money in the bank, I would recommend that you consider how much you have in there and what would happen if you woke up tomorrow morning and found out there had been a run on the bank. And if you don't know what a run on the bank is, you need to educate yourself. This has happened in the past and has led us into some major issues with recessions triggered by people. Basically, when people lose faith in the bank, then they go down to get their money out quickly. When people see people doing that, they continue to inspire and influence other people to go pull their money out. And back in the day, when everybody had to do it in person, you could see the lines at the bank, and people panicked. Today, everything is done electronically, and the thing is, people figure, well, if anything happens, I'll just transfer my funds, and I'm telling you, that will not happen. If there's ever a run on the banks, they will shut down the commerce, and there will be nothing for you to do. And you may say, well, in the long run, I'll get my money back. Or if there's a major collapse, just say, well, who cares anyway? You won't need money after the whole thing falls apart. But the thing is, having money after a disaster or an economic collapse in cash would be priceless. Buy silver as well. I mean, I'm a metals guy. I very much enjoy, investing in precious metals. I don't have very many, but I've always thought it was a very safe hedge against economic collapse, because at the very least, people will always want to be able to trade their silver, across to other people in other countries, even if the whole economy fell apart. I don't know. I'll face the camera for the very end here. I don't know what the solution is to any of the economic problems, and I have no interest in solving them because it's way beyond the scope of this video. But I've always been very cautious not to keep too much money in the bank. I usually don't have very much money anyway, but keeping a little bit of cash on hand for an emergency, it's something like, I can't remember, it's well over half of the American public doesn't even have a small amount, just a few $100s saved away for an emergency. And that's not for lack of trying. I mean, a lot of people are really struggling. So being prepared for a catastrophe is the least of most people's worries when it comes to the economy. But it's bound to happen. It's going to happen. And for those who think that we can just keep climbing and building, look at what happened in Zimbabwe. Look at what happened in all the countries where we started to inflate the money to where you used $1 trillion bill to buy a dozen eggs, and those $1 trillion bills are worth a lot of money now. I have a whole stack of the $5 billion bills from Zimbabwe, and that was right before the whole thing fell apart. So, not a fear monger here. I guess I'm just a word to the wise. Right now, there appears to be some interesting things going on in the economy. If you have any money whatsoever in the bank, you might want to pull it out just temporarily, just to be safe. Or maybe not. It's up to you. Take care, people.